and 1. The Bible says, after the death of Moses, the Lord's disciple, God spoke to Moses' assistant, whose name was Joshua, the son of Nun, and said to him, "Now that my disciple is dead, you are the new leader of Israel. Lead my people across the Jordan River into the promised land. I say to you what I said to Moses, wherever you go will be part of the land of Israel, all the way from the Negev desert in the south to the Lebanon mountains in the north, and from the Mediterranean Sea in the west to the Euphrates River in the east, including all the land of the Hittites. No one will be able to oppose you as long as you live, for I will be with you just as I was with Moses. I will not abandon you or fail to help you. Be strong and brave, for you will be a successful leader of my people, and they shall conquer all the land that I promised to their ancestors. You need only to be strong and courageous and to obey to the letter every law Moses gave you. For if you are careful to obey every one of them, you will be successful in everything you do. Constantly remind the people about these laws, and you yourself must think about them every day and every night, so that you will be sure to obey all of them. For only then you will succeed. Yes, be bold and strong, banish fear and doubt. For remember, the Lord your God is with you wherever you go." Then Joshua issued instructions to the leaders of Israel to tell the people to get ready to cross the Jordan River. "In 3 days we will go across and conquer and live in the land which God has given us," he told them. Then he summoned the leaders of the tribes of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh and reminded them of their agreement with Moses. "The Lord your God has given you a homeland here on the east side of the Jordan River." Moses had told them, "So your wives and children and cattle may remain here, but your troops, fully armed, must lead the other tribes across the Jordan River to help them conquer their territory on the other side. Stay with them until they complete the conquest. Only then may you settle down here on the east side of the Jordan." To this they fully agreed and pledged themselves to obey Joshua as their commander-in-chief. "We will obey you just as we obeyed Moses," they assured him, "and may the Lord your God be with you as he was with Moses. If anyone, no matter who, rebels against your commands, he shall die. So lead on with courage and strength." Joshua chapter 2, verse 1. Then Joshua sent 2 spies from the Israeli camp to Acacia to cross the river and check out the situation on the other side, especially at Jericho. They arrived in an inn operated by a woman named Rahab, who was a prostitute. They were planning to spend the night there, but someone informed the king of Jericho that 2 Israelis, who were suspected of being spies, had arrived in the city that evening. He dispatched a police squadron to Rahab's home, demanding that she surrender them. "They are spies," he explained. "They have been sent by the Israeli leaders to discover the best way to attack us." But she had hidden them, so she told the officer in charge, "The men were here earlier, but I didn't know they were spies. They left the city at dusk as the city gates were about to close. Now, I don't know where they went. If you hurry, you can probably catch up with them." But actually, she had taken them up to the roof and hidden them beneath the piles of flax that were drying there. So the constable and his men went all the way to the Jordan River looking for them. Meanwhile, the city gates were kept shut. Rahab went up to talk to the men before they retired for the night. "I know perfectly well that your God is going to give my country to you," she told them. "We are all afraid of you. Everyone is terrified of the word, if the word Israel is even mentioned. For we have heard how the Lord made a path through the Red Sea for you when you left Egypt, and we know that what you did to Sihon and Og, the 2 Amorite kings east of the Jordan, and how you ruined their land and completely destroyed their people. No wonder we are afraid of you. No one has any fight left in him after hearing things like that. For your God is the supreme God of heaven, not just an ordinary God. Now I beg you for this one thing. Swear to me by the sacred name of your God that when Jericho is conquered, you will let me live along with my father and mother, my brothers and sisters, and all their families. This is only fair after the way I have helped you." The men agreed. "If you won't betray us, we'll see to it that you and your family aren't harmed," they promised. "We'll defend you with our lives." Then, since her house was on top of the city wall, she let them down by a rope from a window. "Escape to the mountains," she told them. "Hide there for 3 days until the men who are searching for you have returned. Then go on your way." But before they left, the men had said to her, "We cannot be responsible for what happens to you unless this rope is hanging from this window, unless all your relatives, your father, mother, brothers, and anyone else are here inside the house. If they go out into the street, we assume no responsibility whatsoever. But we swear that no one inside this house will be killed or injured. However, if you betray us, then this oath will no longer bind us in any way." "I accept your terms," she replied, and she left the scarlet rope hanging from the window. The spies went up into the mountains and stayed there 3 days until the men who were chasing them had returned to the city after searching everywhere along the road without success. Then the 2 spies came down from the mountains and crossed the river and reported to Joshua all that had happened to them. The Lord will certainly give us the entire land, they said, for all the people over there are scared to death of us. The book of Joshua, chapter 3. Early the next morning, Joshua and all the people of Israel left vacation, arrived that evening at the banks of the Jordan River, where they camped for a few days before crossing. On the third day, officers went through the camp giving these instructions. When you see the priests carrying the ark of God, follow them. You have never been where we are going now, so they will guide you. However, stay about a half-mile behind with a clear space between you and the ark. Be sure that you don't get any closer. Then Joshua told the people to purify themselves, for tomorrow, he said, the Lord will do a great miracle. In the morning, Joshua ordered the priests, take up the ark and lead us across the river. So they started out. Today, the Lord told Joshua, I will give you great honor so that all Israel will know that I am with you, just as I was with Moses. Instruct the priests who are carrying the ark to stop at the edge of the river. Then Joshua summoned all the people and told them, come and listen to what the Lord your God has said. Today you are going to know for sure that the living God is among you, and that he will without fail drive out the Canaanites, Hittites, Hivites, Perizzites, Girgashites, Amorites, and Jebusites. And all the people who now live in the land you will soon occupy. Think of it. The ark of God, who is the Lord of the whole earth, will lead you across the river. Now select 12 men, one from each tribe, for a special task. When the priests who are carrying the ark touch the water with their feet, the river will stop flowing as though held back by a dam, and will pile up as though against an invisible wall. Now it was the harvest season, and the Jordan was overflowing all its banks. But as the people set out to cross the river, and as the feet of the priests who were carrying the ark touched the water at the river's edge, suddenly, far up the river at the city of Adam, near Zarethan, the water began piling up as though against a dam. And the people below that point flowed onto the Dead Sea until the riverbed was empty. Then all the people crossed at a spot where the river was so close to the city of Jericho. And the priests who were carrying the ark stood on dry ground in the middle of the Jordan and waited as all the people passed by. Joshua chapter 4, verse 1. When all the people were safely across, the Lord said to Joshua, tell the 12 men chosen for a special task, one from each tribe, each to take a stone from where the priests are standing in the middle of the Jordan, and to carry them out and pile them up as a monument at the place where you camp tonight. So Joshua summoned the 12 men and told them, go out into the middle of the Jordan where the ark is. Each of you is to carry out a stone on your shoulder, 12 stones in all, one for each of the 12 tribes. We will use them to build a monument so that in the future, when your children ask, what is this monument for? You can tell them, it is to remind us that the Jordan River stopped flowing when the ark of God went across. The monument will be a permanent reminder to the people of Israel of this amazing miracle. So the men did as Joshua told them. They took 12 stones from the middle of the Jordan River, one for each tribe, just as the Lord had commanded Joshua. They carried them to the place where they were camped for the night and constructed a monument there. Joshua also built another monument of 12 stones in the middle of the river, at the place where the priests were standing, and it is there to this day. The priests who were carrying the ark stood in the middle of the river until all these instructions of the Lord, which had been given to Joshua by Moses, had been carried out. Meanwhile, the people had hurried across the riverbed, and when everyone was over, the people watched the priests carry the ark up out of the riverbed. The troops of Reuben, Gad, and the half-tribe of Manasseh, fully armed as Moses had instructed, and 40,000 strong, led the other tribes of the Lord's army across to the plains of Jericho. It was a tremendous day for Joshua. The Lord made him great in the eyes of all the people of Israel, and they revered him as much as they had Moses, and respected him deeply all the rest of his life. For it was Joshua who at the Lord's command issued the orders to the priests carrying the ark. Come up from the riverbed. The Lord told him to command them. So Joshua issued the order, and as soon as the priests came out, the water poured down again as usual and overflowed the banks of the river as before. This miracle occurred on the 25th of March. That day the entire nation crossed the Jordan River and camped at Gilgal at the eastern edge of the city of Jericho. And there 12 stones from the Jordan were piled up as a monument. Then Joshua explained again the purpose of the stones. In the future, he said, when your children ask you why these stones are here and what they mean, you're to tell them that these stones are a reminder of this amazing miracle, that the nation of Israel crossed the Jordan River on dry ground. Tell them how the Lord our God dried up the river right before our eyes and then kept it dry until we were all across. It is the same thing the Lord did 40 years ago at the Red Sea. He did this so that all the nations of the earth will realize that Jehovah is the mighty God, and so that all of you will worship him forever. Joshua chapter 5, verse 1. When the nations west of the Jordan River, the Amorites and Canaanites who lived along the Mediterranean coast, heard that the Lord had dried up the Jordan River so that the people of Israel could cross, their courage melted away completely, and they were paralyzed with fear. The Lord then told Joshua to set aside a day to circumcise the entire male population of Israel. It was the second time in Israel's history that this was done. The Lord instructed them to manufacture flint knives for this purpose. The place where the circumcision rite took place was named the Hill of the Foreskins. The reason for this second circumcision ceremony was that although when Israel had left Egypt, all the men who had been old enough to bear arms had been circumcised, that entire generation had died during the years in the wilderness, and none of the boys born since the time had been circumcised. For the nation of Israel had traveled back and forth across the wilderness for 40 years until all the men who had been old enough to bear arms when they left Egypt were dead. They had not obeyed the Lord, and he vowed that he wouldn't let them enter the land he had promised to Israel, a land that flowed with milk and honey. So now Joshua circumcised their children, the men who had grown up to take their fathers' places. And the Lord said to Joshua, "Today I've ended your shame of not being circumcised." So the place where this was done was called Gilgal, meaning to end. And it is called that today. After the ceremony, the entire nation rested in camp until the raw flesh of their wounds had been healed. When they were camped at Gilgal in the plains of Jericho, they celebrated the Passover during the evening of April 1st. The next day they began to eat from the gardens and grain fields which they invaded, and they made unleavened bread. The following day no manna fell, and was never seen again. So from that time on they lived on the crops of Canaan. As Joshua was sizing up the city of Jericho, a man appeared nearby with a drawn sword. Joshua strode over him and demanded, "Are you a friend or foe?" "I'm the commander-in-chief of the Lord's army," he replied. Joshua fell to the ground before him and worshipped and said, "Give me your commands." "Take off your shoes," the commander told him, "for this is holy ground." And Joshua did. Joshua chapter 6, verse 1. The gates of Jericho were kept tightly shut because the people were afraid of the Israelis. No one was allowed to go in or out. But the Lord said to Joshua, "Jericho and its king and all its mighty warriors are already defeated, for I have given them to you. Your entire army is to walk around the city once a day for 6 days, followed by 7 priests walking ahead of the ark, each carrying a trumpet made from a ram's horn. On the 7th day, you are to walk around the city 7 times, with the priests blowing their trumpets. Then when they give one long, loud blast, all the people are to give a mighty shout, and the walls of the city will fall down, then move in upon the city from every direction." So Joshua summoned the priests and gave them their instructions, and the armed men would lead the procession, followed by 7 priests blowing continually on their trumpets. Behind them would come the priests carrying the ark, followed by a rear guard. "Let there be complete silence except for the trumpets," Joshua commanded. "Not a single word from any of you until I tell you to shout. Then shout." The ark was carried around the city once that day, after which everyone returned to the camp again and spent the night there. At dawn the next morning, they went around again and returned again to the camp. They followed this pattern for 6 days. At the dawn of the 7th day, they started out again, but this time they went around the city not once, but 7 times. The 7th time, as the priest blew a long, loud trumpet blast, Joshua yelled to the people, "Shout! The Lord has given us the city." He had told them previously, "Kill everyone except Rahab the prostitute and anyone in her house, for she protected our spies. Don't take any loot, for everything is to be destroyed. If it isn't, disaster will fall upon the entire nation of Israel. But all the silver and gold and the utensils of bronze and iron will be dedicated to the Lord and must be brought into his treasury." So when the people heard the trumpet blast, they shouted as long as they could. And suddenly the walls of Jericho crumbled and fell before them. And the people of Israel poured into the city from every side and captured it. They destroyed everything in it, men and women, young and old, oxen, sheep, donkeys, everything. Meanwhile, Joshua said to the 2 spies, "Keep your promise. Go and rescue the prostitute and everyone with her." The young men found her and rescued her along with her father, mother, brothers, and other relatives who were with her. Arrangements were made for them to live outside the camp of Israel. Then the Israelis burned the city and everything in it, except that the silver and gold and bronze and iron utensils were kept for the Lord's treasury. Thus Joshua saved Rahab the prostitute and her relatives who were with her in the house. And they still live among the Israelites because she hid the spies sent to Jericho by Joshua. Then Joshua declared a terrible curse upon anyone who might rebuild Jericho, warning that when the foundation was laid, the builder's oldest son would die, and when the gates were set, his youngest son would die. So the Lord was with Joshua, and his name became famous everywhere. Joshua chapter 7, verse 1. But there was sin among the Israelis. God's command to destroy everything except that which was reserved for the Lord's treasury was disobeyed. For Achan, the son of Carmi, grandson of Sabdi, the great-grandson of Zerah, and of the tribe of Judah, took some loot for himself, and the Lord was very angry with the entire nation because of this. Soon after Jericho's defeat, Joshua sent some of his men to spy out the city of Ai, east of Bethel. Upon their return, they told Joshua, "It's a small city. It won't take more than 2,000 or 3,000 of us to destroy it. There's no point in all of us going there." So approximately 3,000 soldiers were sent, and they were soundly defeated. About 36 of the Israelis were killed during the attack, and many others died while being chased by the men of Ai as far as the quarries. The Israeli army was paralyzed with fear at this turn of events. Joshua and the elders of Israel tore their clothing and lay prostrate before the ark of the Lord until evening with dust on their heads. Joshua cried out to the Lord, "O Jehovah, why have you brought us over the Jordan River if you're going to let the Amorites kill us? Why weren't we content with what we had? Why didn't we stay on the other side? O Lord, what am I to do now that Israel has fled from her enemies? For when the Canaanites and the other nearby nations hear about it, they will surround us and attack us and wipe us out. And then what will happen to the honor of your great name?" But the Lord said to Joshua, "Get up off your face. Israel has sinned and disobeyed my commandment and has taken loot when I said it was not to be taken. And they have not only taken it, they've lied about it and have hidden it among their belongings. That is why the people of Israel are being defeated. That is why your men are running from their enemies, for they are cursed. I will not stay with you any longer unless you completely rid yourselves of this sin. Get up, tell the people. Each of you must undergo purification rites in preparation for tomorrow. For the Lord your God of Israel says that someone has stolen from him, and you cannot defeat your enemies until you deal with this sin. In the morning you must come by tribes, and the Lord will point out the tribe to which the guilty man belongs. And that tribe must come by its clans, and the Lord will point out the guilty clan. And the clan must come by families, and then each member of the guilty family must come one by one. And the one who has stolen that which belongs to the Lord shall be burned with fire, along with everything he has, for he has violated the covenant of the Lord and has brought calamity upon all of Israel." So early the next morning, Joshua brought the tribes of Israel before the Lord, and the tribe of Judah was indicated. Then he brought the clans of Judah, and the clan of Zerah was singled out. Then the families of that clan were brought before the Lord, and the family of Zabdi was indicated. Zabdi's family was brought man by man, and his grandson Achan was found to be the guilty one. Joshua said to Achan, "My son, give glory to the God of Israel. Make your confession. Tell me what you've done." Achan replied, "I have sinned against the Lord God of Israel, for I saw a beautiful robe imported from Babylon, and some silver worth $200, and a bar of gold worth $500. I wanted them so much that I took them, and they are hidden in the ground beneath my tent, with the silver buried deeper than the rest." So Joshua sent some men to search for the loot. They ran to the tent and found the stolen goods hidden there, just as Achan had said, with the silver buried beneath the rest. They brought it all to Joshua and laid it on the ground in front of him. Then Joshua and all the Israelites took Achan, the silver, the robe, the wedge of gold, his sons, his daughters, his oxen, donkeys, sheep, his tent, and everything he had, and brought them to the valley of Achor. Then Joshua said to Achan, "Why have you brought calamity upon us? The Lord will now bring calamity upon you." And the men of Israel stoned them to death and burned their bodies. Well, the family wasn't guilty of that. Okay. And piled a great heap of stones upon them. The stones are there to this day. And even today, that place is called the Valley of Calamity. And so the fierce anger of the Lord was ended. Joshua 8:1. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Don't be afraid or discouraged. Take the entire army and go to Ai, for it is now yours to conquer. I have given the king of Ai and all the people to you. You shall do to them as you did to Jericho and her king. But this time you may keep the loot and the cattle for yourselves and set an ambush behind the city." Before the main army left for Ai, Joshua sent 30,000 of his bravest troops to hide in ambush close behind the city, alert for action. "This is a plan," he explained to them. "When our main army attacks, the men of Ai will come out to fight as they did before, and we will run away. We will let them chase us until they have all left the city, for they will say, 'The Israelis are running away again, just as they did before.' Then you will jump up from the ambush and enter the city, for the Lord will give it to you. Set the city on fire as the Lord has commanded. You now have your instructions." So they left that night and lay in ambush between Bethel and the west of Ai. But Joshua and the rest of the army remained in the camp at Jericho. Early the next morning, Joshua roused his men and started toward Ai, accompanied by the elders of Israel, and stopped at the edge of a valley north of the city. That night, Joshua sent another 5,000 men to join troops of ambush on the west side of the city. He himself spent the night in the valley. The king of Ai, seeing the Israelis across the valley, went out early the next morning and attacked at the plain of Arabah. But of course, he didn't realize that there was an ambush behind the city. Joshua and the Israeli army fled across the wilderness as though badly beaten, and all the soldiers in the city were called out to chase after them, so the city was left defenseless. There was not a soldier left in Ai or Bethel, and the city gates were left wide open. Then the Lord said to Joshua, "Point your spear toward Ai, for I will give you the city." Joshua did. And when the men in ambush saw this signal, they jumped up and poured into the city and set it on fire. When the men of Ai looked behind them, smoke from the city was filling the sky, and they had nowhere to go. When Joshua and the troops who were with him saw the smoke, they knew that their men had been in the ambush, were inside the city. So they turned upon their pursuers and began killing them. Then the Israelis who were inside the city came out and began to destroy the enemy from the rear. So the men of Ai were caught in a trap, and all of them died. No man survived or escaped, except for the king of Ai, who was captured and brought to Joshua. When the army of Israel had finished slaughtering all the men outside of the city, they went back and finished off everyone left inside. So the entire population of Ai, 12,000 in all, was wiped out that day. For Joshua kept his spear pointed toward Ai until the last person was dead. Only the cattle and the loot were not destroyed, for the armies of Israel kept these for themselves. The Lord had told Joshua they could. So Ai became a desolate mound of refuge, as it still is today. Joshua hanged the king of Ai on a tree until evening, but as the sun was going down, he took the body and threw it in front of the city gate. There he piled a great heap of stones over it, which can still be seen. Then Joshua built an altar to the Lord God of Israel at Mount Ebal, as Moses had commanded in the book of his laws. Make me an altar of boulders that have neither been broken or carved, the Lord had said concerning Mount Ebal. Then the priests offered burnt sacrifices and peace offerings to the Lord on the altar. And as the people have watched, Joshua carved upon the stones of the altar each of the 10 commandments. Then all the people of Israel, including elders, officers, judges, and the foreigners living among them, divided into 2 groups, half of them standing at the foot of Mount Gerizim and half at the foot of Mount Ebal. Between them stood the priests with the ark, ready to pronounce their blessing. This was all done in accordance with the instructions given long before by Moses. Joshua then read to them all of the statements of blessing and curses that Moses had written in the book of God's law. Every commandment Moses had ever given Israel was read before the entire assembly, including the women and children and the foreigners who lived among the Israelis. Joshua chapter 9. When the kings of the surrounding area heard what had happened to Jericho, they quickly combined their armies to fight for their lives against Joshua and the Israelis. These were the kings of the nations west of the Jordan River, along the shores of the Mediterranean, as far north as the Lebanon mountains, the Hittites, Amorites, Canaanites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. But when the people of Gibeon heard what had happened to Jericho and Ai, they resorted to trickery to save themselves. They sent ambassadors to Joshua wearing worn-out clothing as though they were from a long journey, with patched shoes, weather-worn saddlebags on their donkeys, old patched wineskins, and dry moldy bread. When they arrived at the camp of Israel at Gilgal, they told Joshua and the men of Israel, "We have come from a distant land to ask for a peace treaty with you." The Israelis replied to these Hivites, How do we know you don't live nearby? For if you do, we cannot make a treaty with you." They replied, "We will be your slaves." "But who are you?" Joshua demanded. "Where do you come from?" And they told him, "We are from a very distant country. We have heard of the might of the Lord your God and all that he did in Egypt, and what you did to the 2 kings of the Amorites, Sihon, king of Heshbon, and Og, king of Bashan. So our elders and our people instructed us, prepare for a long journey. Go to the people of Israel and declare our nation to be their servants and ask for peace. This bread was hot from the ovens when we left, but now as you see it, it's dry and moldy. You lying wonder. These wineskins were new, but now they are old and cracked. Our clothing and shoes have become worn out from our long, hard trip." Joshua and the other leaders finally believed them. They did not bother to ask the Lord, but went ahead and signed a peace treaty, and the leaders of Israel ratified the agreement with a binding oath. 3 days later, the facts came out. These men were close neighbors. The Israeli army set out at once to investigate and reached their cities in 3 days. The names of the cities were Gibeon, Shepheroth, Beeroth, and Kirjath Jearim. But the cities were not harmed because of the vow which the leaders of Israel had made before the Lord God. The people of Israel were angry with their leaders because of the peace treaty. But the leaders replied, "We have sworn before the Lord God of Israel that we will not touch them, and we won't. We must let them live, for if we break our oath, the wrath of Jehovah will be upon us." So they became servants of the Israelis, chopping their wood and carrying their water. Joshua summoned their leaders and demanded, "Why have you lied to us by saying that you lived in a distant land when you were actually living right here among us? Now a curse shall be upon you. From this moment, you must always furnish us with servants to chop wood and carry water for the service of our God." They replied, "We did it because we were told that Jehovah instructed his people, Moses, to conquer this entire land and to destroy all the people living in it. So we feared for our lives because of you. That is why we've done it. But now we are in your hands. You may do to us as you wish." So Joshua would not allow the people of Israel to kill them, but they became wood choppers and water carriers for the people of Israel and for the altar of the Lord, wherever it would be built, for the Lord hadn't yet told them where to build it. This arrangement is still in force at the time of this writing. The book of Joshua, chapter 10, verse 1. When Adonizedek, the king of Jerusalem, heard how Joshua had captured and destroyed Ai and killed its kings, the same as he had done at Jericho, and how the people of Gibeon had made peace with Israel and were now their allies, he was very frightened. For Gibeon was a great city, as great as the royal cities and much larger than Ai, and his men were known as hard fighters. So King Adonizedek of Jerusalem sent messengers to several other kings, King Hoham of Hebron, King Piram of Jarmuth, King Japiah of Lachish, King Deber of Eglon. Come and help me destroy Gibeon, he urged them, for they have made peace with Joshua and the people of Israel. So these 5 Amorite kings combined their armies for a united attack on Gibeon. The men of Gibeon hurriedly sent messengers to Joshua at Gilgal. Come and help your servants, they demanded. Come quickly and save us, for all the kings of the Amorites who live in the hills are here with their armies. So Joshua and the Israeli army left Gilgal and went to rescue Gibeon. Don't be afraid of them, the Lord said to Joshua, for they are already defeated. I've given them to you to destroy. Not a single one of them will be able to stand up to you. Joshua traveled all night from Gilgal and took the enemy armies by surprise. Then the Lord threw them into a panic so that the army of Israel slaughtered great numbers of them at Gibeon and chased the others all the way to Beth Horon and Azekah and Makkedah, killing them along the way. And as the enemy was racing down the hill to Beth Horon, the Lord destroyed them with a great hailstorm that continued all the way to Azekah. In fact, more men died from the hail than by the swords of the Israelis. As the men of Israel were pursuing and harassing the foe, Joshua prayed aloud, "Let the sun stand still over Gibeon, and let the moon stand in its place over the valley of Ahijalon." And the sun and the moon didn't move until the Israeli army had finished the destruction of its enemies. This is described in greater detail in the book of Jasher. So the sun stopped in the heavens and stayed there for almost 24 hours. There had never been such a day before, and there never has been another since, when the Lord stopped the sun and the moon, all because of the prayer of one man. But the Lord was fighting for Israel. Afterwards, Joshua and the Israeli army returned to Gilgal. During the battle, the 5 kings escaped and hid at the cave at Makkedah. And when the news was brought to Joshua that they had been found, he issued a command that a great stone be rolled against the mouth of the cave, that the guards be placed there to keep the kings inside. Then Joshua commanded the rest of the army, "Go on chasing the enemy and cut them down from the rear. Don't let them get back to their cities, for the Lord will help you to completely destroy them." So Joshua and the Israeli army continued the slaughter and wiped out the 5 armies except for a tiny remnant that managed to reach their fortified cities. Then the Israelis returned to their camp at Makkedah without having lost a single man, and after that no one dared attack Israel. Joshua now instructed his men to remove the stone from the mouth of the cave and to bring out the 5 kings of Jerusalem, Hebron, Jarmuth, Lachish, and Eglon. Joshua told the captains of his army to put their feet on the king's necks. "Don't ever be afraid or discouraged," Joshua said to the men. "Be strong and courageous, for the Lord is going to do this to all of your enemies." With that, Joshua plunged his sword into each of the 5 kings, killing them, then hanged them on 5 trees until evening. As the sun was going down, Joshua instructed that their bodies be taken down and thrown into the cave where they had been hiding, and a great pile of stone was placed at the mouth of the cave. The pile is still there today. On that same day, Joshua destroyed the city of Makkedah and killed its king and everyone in it. Not one person in the entire city was left alive. Then the Israelis went to Libnah. There too the Lord gave them the city and its king. Every last person was slaughtered, just as at Jericho. From Libnah they went to Lachish and attacked it, and the Lord gave it to them. On the second day, here too the entire population was slaughtered, just as at Libnah. During the attack on Lachish, King Horm of Gezer arrived with his army to try to help defend the city. But Joshua's men killed him and destroyed his entire army. The Israeli army then captured Eglon in the first day, and as at Lachish, they killed everyone in the city. After leaving Eglon, they went on to Hebron and captured it and all of its surrounding villages, slaughtering the entire population. Not one person was left alive. Then they turned back to Deber, which they quickly captured with all sorts of outlying villages, all of its outlying villages. And they killed everyone just as they had at Libnah. So Joshua and his army conquered the whole country, the nations and the kings of the hill country, the Negeb, the lowlands, the mountain slopes. They destroyed everyone in the land, just as the Lord God of Israel had commanded, slaughtering them from Kadesh Barnea to Gaza and from Goshen to Gibeon. This was all accomplished in one campaign, for the Lord God of Israel was fighting for his people. Then Joshua and his army returned to their camp at Gilgal. Joshua chapter 11, verse 1. When King Jabin of Hazor heard what had happened, he sent urgent messages to the following kings: King Jobab of Madon, the king of Shimron, the king of Ashbath, all the kings of the northern hill country, the kings in Arabah, south of Chinnerah, those in the lowland, the kings in the mountain areas of Dor on the west, the kings of Canaan, both east and west, the kings of the Amorites, the kings of the Hittites, the kings of the Perizzites, the king in the Jebusite hill country, the Hivite kings in the cities of the slopes of Mount Hermon, in the land of Mizpah. All these kings responded by mobilizing their armies and uniting to crush Israel. Their combined troops, along with a vast array of horses and chariots, covered the landscape around the springs at Moram as far as one could see, for they established their camps at the spring of Moram. But the Lord said to Joshua, don't be afraid of them, for by this time tomorrow they will all be dead. Hamstring their horses and burn their chariots. Joshua and his troops arrived suddenly at the springs of Merom and attacked. And the Lord gave all that vast army to the Israelis, who chased them as far as the great Sidon and a place called the Salt Pits, and eastward into the valley of Mizpah. So not one enemy troop survived the battle. Then Joshua and his men did as the Lord had instructed, for they hamstrung the horses and burned all the chariots. On the way back, Joshua captured Hazor and killed its king. Hazor had at one time been the capital of the federation of all those kingdoms. Every person there was killed and the city was burned. Then he had attacked and destroyed all the other cities of those kings. All the people were slaughtered, just as Moses had commanded long before. However, Joshua did not burn any of the cities built on mounds except for Hazor. All the loot and cattle of the ravaged cities were taken by the Israelis for themselves, but they killed all the people. For so the Lord had commanded his disciple Moses, and Moses passed the commandment on to Joshua, who did as he had been told. He carefully obeyed all the Lord's instructions to Moses. So Joshua conquered the entire land, the hill country, the Negev, the land of Goshen, the lowlands, the Arabah, and the hills and the lowlands of Israel. The Israeli territory now extended all the way from Mount Halak near Seir to Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon at the foot of Mount Hermon. And Joshua killed all the kings of those territories. It took 7 years of war to accomplish all of this. None of the cities was given a peace treaty except the Hivites of Gibeon. All the others were destroyed. For the Lord made the enemy kings want to fight the Israelis instead of asking for peace. So they were mercilessly killed as the Lord had commanded Moses. During this period, Joshua routed all of the giants, the descendants of Anak, who lived in the hill country in Hebron, Debir, Anab, Judah, and Israel. He killed them all and completely destroyed their cities. None was left in the land of Israel, though some still remained in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod. So Joshua took the entire land just as the Lord had instructed Moses, and he gave it to the people of Israel as their inheritance, dividing the land among the tribes, so the land finally rested from its war. Joshua chapter 12. Here is the list of the kings on the east side of the Jordan River whose cities were destroyed by the Israelis. The area involved stretched all the way from the valley of the Arnon River to Mount Hermon, including the cities of the eastern desert. King Sihon of the Amorites, who lived in Heshbon, his kingdom extended from Arior on the edge of Arnon Valley and from the middle of the valley of the Arnon River to the Jabbok River, which is the boundary of the Ammonites. This includes half of the present area of Gilead, which lies north of the Jabbok River. Sihon also controlled the Jordan River Valley as far north as the western shores of the Lake of Galilee and as far south as the Dead Sea and the slopes of Mount Pisgah. King Og of Bashan, the last of the Rephaim, who lived at Ashtaroth and Edrei, he ruled a territory stretching from Mount Hermon in the north to Salika on Mount Bashan in the east and on the west, extending to the boundary of the kingdoms of Geshur, Makkah. His kingdom also stretched south to include the northern half of Gilead, where the boundary touched the border of King Sihon, king of Heshbon. Moses and the people of Israel had destroyed these people, and Moses gave the land to the tribes of Reuben and the half-tribe of Manasseh. Here is the list of the kings destroyed by Joshua and the armies of Israel on the west side of the Jordan. This land, which lay between the Baal-Gad in the valley of Lebanon and Mount Halak west of Mount Seir, was allotted by Joshua to the other tribes of Israel. The area included the hill country, the lowlands, the Arabah, the mountain slopes, the Judean desert, and the Negev. The people who lived there were the Hittites, the Amorites, the Canaanites, the Perizzites, the Hivites, and the Jebusites. The king of Jericho, the king of Ai near Bethel, the king of Jerusalem, the king of Hebron, the king of Jarmuth, the king of Lachish, the king of Eglon, the king of Gezer, the king of Debir, the king of Geder, the king of Harmah, the king of Ered, the king of Libnah, the king of Adullam, the king of Makkedah, the king of Bethel, the king of Tappuah, the king of Hepher, the king of Aphek, the king of Lasharon, the king of Madon, the king of Hazon, the king of Shemron-Meron, the king of Ashphaph, the king of Tanakh, the king of Megiddo, the king of Kadesh, the king of Jokneam in Carmel, the king of Dor in the city of Naphtador, the king of Goim in Gilgal, the king of Tirzah. So in all, 31 kings in their cities were destroyed. Wow. Joshua chapter 13, verse 1. Joshua was now an old man. You are growing old, the Lord said to him, and there are still many nations to be conquered. Here's the list of the areas still to be occupied. all the land of the Philistines, all the land of the Gershurites, the territory now belonging to the Canaanites from the brook of Egypt to the southern boundary of Ekron, 5 cities of the Philistines, Gaza, Ashdod, Ashkelon, Gath, Ekron, the land of Ephraim in the south, in the north, all the land of the Canaanites, including Merah, which belongs to the Sidonians, stretching northward to Ephah, to the boundary of the Amorites, the land of the Gabalites on the coast, and all of the Lebanon mountain area from Belgad beneath Mount Hermon in the south to the entrance of Hamath in the north, all the hill country from Lebanon to Mithroth-Maim, including all the land of the Sidonians. I'm ready to drive these people out from before the nation of Israel, so include all this territory when you divide the land among the 9 tribes and the half-tribe of Manasseh as I have commanded you. The other half-tribe of Manasseh and the tribes of Reuben and Gad had already received their inheritance on the east side of the Jordan, for Moses had previously assigned this land to them. Their territory ran from Arear on the edge of the valley of the Arnon River, included in the city of the valley, and crossbed the tableland of Medida to Dibon. It also included all the cities of King Sihon of the Amorites, who reigned at Heshbon, and extended as far as the borders of Ammon. It included Gilead, the territory of the Gershonites and the Mekathites, all of Mount Hermon, Mount Bashan with its city of Salika, and all the territory of King Og of Bashan, who had reigned in Ashtaroth and Edrei. He was the last of the Rephaim, for Moses had attacked them and driven them out. However, the people of Israel had not driven out the Gershonites or the Mekathites, who still live there among the Israelites to this day. The territorial assignments. The land given to the tribe of Levi. Moses hadn't assigned any land to the tribe of Levi. Instead, they were given the offerings brought to the Lord. The land given to the tribe of Reuben. Fitting the size of its territory to the size of its population, Moses had assigned the following area to the tribe of Reuben. Their land extended from Arear on the edge of the valley of the Arnon River, past the city of Arnon in the middle of the valley to beyond the tableland near Medeba. It included Heshbon and the other cities on the plain. Dibon, Bamoth Baal, Beth Baal Meon, Jehaz, Kedemoth, Mephah, Kirithiam, Sibnah, Zereth Sha'ar on the mountain above the valley, Beth Peor, Beth Jeshemoth on the slopes of Mount Pisgah. The land of Reuben also included the cities of the tableland in the kingdom of Sihon. Sihon was the king who had lived in Heshbon and was killed by Moses along with the other chiefs of Midian, Evi, Rechem, Zur, Hur, and Reba. The people of Israel also killed Balaam the magician, the son of Beor. The Jordan River was the western boundary of the tribe of Reuben. The land given to the tribe of Gad. Moses also assigned the land to the tribe of Gad in proportion to its population. This territory included Jazer, all the cities of Gilead, the half of the land of Ammon as far as Areor near Rabah. It also extended from Heshbon to Ramoth Mizpah and Betonim and Mehanan to Lodebar. In the valley where Beth Haram and Beth Nimrah, Succoth, Zaphon, and the rest of the kingdom of King Sihon of Eshbon. The Jordan River was on the western border, extending as far as the Lake of Galilee. Then the border turned east from the Jordan River. The land given to the half-tribe of Manasseh. Moses had assigned the following territory to the half-tribe of Manasseh in proportion to its needs. Their territory extended north from Mahanaim, including all of Bashan, the former kingdom of King Og, and the 6 cities of Jair and Bashan, half of Gilead, and King Og's royal cities of Ashtaroth and Edrei were given to half of the clan of Mechor, who was Manasseh's son. That was how Moses divided the land east of the Jordan River where the people were camped, at that time across from Jericho. But Moses had given no land to the tribe of Levi, for as he explained to them, the Lord God was their inheritance. He was all they needed. He would take care of them in other ways. Joshua chapter 14, verse 1. The conquered lands of Canaan were allotted to the remaining 9.5 tribes of Israel. The decision as to which tribe would receive which area was decided by throwing dice before the Lord. And he caused him to turn up in the ways he wanted. Eleazar the priest, Joshua, and the tribal leaders supervised the lottery. I see. Moses had already given land. You learn something new every day. Moses had already given the land to the 2.5 tribes on the east side of the Jordan River. The tribe of Joseph had become 2 separate tribes, Manasseh and Ephraim, and the Levites were given no land at all, except cities in which to live and surrounding pasture lands for their cattle. So the distribution of the land was in strict accordance with the Lord's directions to Moses. The land given to Caleb. A delegation from the tribe of Judah led by Caleb came to Joshua in Gilgal. Remember what the Lord said to Moses about you and me when we were at Kadesh Barnea, Caleb asked Joshua. I was 40 years old at the time, and Moses had sent us from Kadesh Barnea to spy out the land of Canaan. I reported what I felt was the truth, but our brothers who went with us frightened the people and discouraged them from entering into the promised land. But since I had followed the Lord my God, Moses told me, the section of Canaan you were just in shall belong to you and your descendants forever. Now, as you see, from that time until now, the Lord has kept me alive and well all these 45 years since crisscrossing the wilderness. And today, I'm 85 years old. Guess it was his birthday. I'm as strong now as I was when Moses sent us on that journey, and I can still travel and fight as well as I could then. So I'm asking that you will give me the hill country that the Lord promised me. You will remember that as the spies, we found the Anakim living there in great walled cities. But if the Lord is with me, I shall drive them out of the land. So Joshua blessed him and gave him Hebron as a permanent inheritance because he had followed the Lord God of Israel. Before that time, Hebron had been called Kiriath Arba, after a great hero of the Anakim. And there was no resistance from the local populations as the Israelis resettled the land. Joshua 15. The land given to the tribe of Judah as assigned by sacred lot. Judah's southern boundary began at the northern border of Edom, crossed the wilderness of Zin, and ended at the northern edge of Negeb. More specifically, this boundary began at the south bay of the Dead Sea, ran along the road going south of Mount Arabim on into the wilderness of Zin to Hezron, south of Kadesh Barnea, and then up through Karka and Asmon until it finally reached the brook of Egypt and along that to the Mediterranean Sea. The eastern boundary extended along the Dead Sea to the mouth of the Jordan River. The northern boundary began at the bay where the Jordan River empties into the Salt Sea, crossed to Beth Hogla, then proceeded north to Beth Arabah to the stone of Bashan, son of Reuben. From that point, it went through the valley of Achor to Debir, where it turned northward toward Gilgal, opposite the slopes of Adumim on the south side of the valley. From there, the border extended to the springs at En Shemesh and on to En Regal. The boundary then passed through the valley of Hinnom along the southern shoulder of Jebus, where the city of Jerusalem is located, then west to the top of the mountain above the valley of Hinnom, and on up to the northern end of the valley of Rephaim. From there, the border extended from the top of the mountain to the spring of Nephoth, and from there, the cities of Mount Ephraim, before it turned northward to circle around Bela, which is another name for Kiriath Jearim. Then the border circled west of Bela to Mount Seir, along to the town of Chethlon and northern shoulder of Mount Jearim, and went down to Beth Shemesh. Turning northward west again, the boundary proceeded past the south of Timnah to the shoulder of the hill of north of Ekron, where it bent to the left, passing through south to Shikron and Mount Bela. Turning up again to the north, it passed Jabneel and ended at the Mediterranean Sea. The western border was the shoreline of the Mediterranean. The land given to Caleb. The Lord instructed Joshua to assign some of Judah's territory to Caleb, son of Jephunneh. So he was given the city of Arba, also called Hebron, which is named after Anak's father. Caleb drove out the descendants of 3 sons of Anak, Talmai, Shishai, and Ahinam. Then he fought against the people living in the city of Debir, formerly called Kiriath Sefer. Caleb said that he would give his daughter, Ashash, to be the wife of anyone who'd go and capture Kiriath Sefer. Othniel, son of Kenaz, Caleb's nephew, was the one who conquered it. So Achash became Othniel's wife. His cousin? As she was leaving with him, she urged him to ask her father for an additional field as a wedding present. She got off her donkey to speak to Caleb about this. What is it? What can I do for you? He asked. And she replied, give me another present. For the land you gave me is a desert. Give us some springs too. Then he gave her the upper and lower springs. So this was the assignment of the land of the tribe of Judah. The cities of Judah, which were situated along the borders of Edom and the Negeb, namely Kabzeel, Eder, Jagur, Kenah, Damana, Adadah, Kedesh, Hazar, Ithan, Ziph, Telam, Bela, Hazar Hadathah, Kiriath Hezron or Hazar, Ammon, Shema, Moladah, Hazar Gadah, Heshmon, Beth Pelet, Hazar Shuel, Beersheba, Viziothaiah, Bela, Lim, Ezem, Etolad, Chizil, Hormah, Ziklag, Madmana, Sansatha, Belabioth, Silham, An, and Remah. And all these were 29 of the cities with their surrounding villages. The following cities located in the lowlands were also given to Judah: Eshtol, Zorah, Asna, Zanoah, Enganim, Tupah, Edam, Jarmuth, Ajalam, Soko, Ezekah, Sharam, Adatham, Gedera, and Gederathaim. In all, there were 14 of these cities with their surrounding villages. The tribe of Judah also inherited 25 other cities with their villages: Zenon, Hadashah, Migdal-Gad, Dilian, Mizpah, Joktheel, Lachish, Bozkath, Eglon, Kabah, Laman, Shitlith, Shakatador, Beth Dagon, Nama, sound like speaking in tongues, Makkedah, Libnah, Ether, Asan, Ephah, Ashna, Nizith, Keilah, Ashgib, Mibashah. The territory of the tribe of Judah also included all the towns and villages of Ekron. From Ekron, the boundary extended to the Mediterranean and included all the cities along the borders of Ashdod with their nearby villages, also the city of Ashdod with its villages, and Gaza with its villages, as far as the brook of Egypt, also the entire Mediterranean coast from the mouth of the brook of Egypt on the south to Tyre on the north. Judah also received these 44 cities in the hill country with their surrounding villages. Well, here we go. Shamar, Jitar, Sakat, Dana, Kiriasana, or Debor, Anab, Eshtima, Anam, Goshen, Holon, Gila, Arab, Duma, Eshan, Janim, Beth Tapua, Ephika, Hamtua, Kiriath Arba or Hebron, Ziar, Maon, Carmel, Ziph, Jutah, Zezreel, Jokdim, Zanoah, Cain, Gibeah, Timnah, Hahu, Bezur, Gedar, Meroth, Bethanath, Eltekon, Kiriath Baal, also known as Kiriath Jearim, Rabbah, Betharabah, Midam, Sekasah, Nabsham, the city of Salt, and En Gedi. Whew! But the tribe of Judah could not drive out the Jebusites who lived in the city of Jerusalem, so the Jebusites lived there among the people of Judah to this day. Joshua chapter 16, verse 1. The southern boundary of the tribe of Joseph, Ephraim, and the half-tribe of Manasseh. This boundary extended from the Jordan River at Jericho through the wilderness and the hill country to Bethel. It went then from Bethel to Luz and on to Ataroth in the territory of the Archites and west of the border of the Japhletites as far as the lower Beth Horon, then to Gezer and on over to the Mediterranean. The land given to Ephraim. The eastern boundary began at Atara Adar. From there it ran up to the upper Beth Horon, then on to the Mediterranean Sea. The northern boundary began at the sea, ran east of Mikmathah, then continued on past Tanah, Shiloh, and Jonoah. From Jonoah it turned southward to Atara and Nara, touched Jericho, and ended at the Jordan River. The western half of the northern boundary went on from Tapua and followed along Kanah Brook to the Mediterranean Sea. Ephraim was given some of the cities in the territory of the half-tribe of Manasseh. The Canaanites lived in Jizar, were never driven out, so they still live as slaves among the people of Ephraim. Joshua chapter 17, verse 1. The land given to the half-tribe of Manasseh, Joseph's oldest son. The clan of Mechor, Manasseh's oldest son, who was the father of Gilead, had already been given the land of Gilead and Bashan on the east side of the Jordan River, for they were great warriors. So now the land on the west side of the Jordan was given to the clans of Ebiezer, Helek, Esriel, Shechem, Shemida, and Hepher. However, Hepher's son, Zelophehad, grandson of Gilead, great-grandson of Machir, and great-grandson of Manasseh, had no sons. He had only 5 daughters whose names were Mahlah, Noah, Hoglah, Milcah, and Tirzah. These women came to Eleazar the priest and to Joshua and the Israeli leaders and reminded them, the Lord told Moses that we were to receive as much property as the men of our tribe. So as the Lord had commanded through Moses, these 5 men were given an inheritance along with their 5 great uncles, and the total inheritance came to 10 sections of land, in addition to the land of Gilead and Bashan across the Jordan River. The northern boundary of the tribe of Manasseh extended southward from the border of Asher, Mikmethath, which is east of the Shechem. On the south, the boundary went from Mechshath to the spring of Tapua. The land of Tapua belonged to Manasseh, but the city of Tapua on the border of Manasseh's land belonged to the tribe of Ephraim. From the spring of Tapua, the border of Manasseh followed the north bank of Kanah Brook onto the Mediterranean Sea. Several cities south of the brook belonged to the tribe of Ephraim, though they were located in Manasseh's territory. The land south of the brook and as far as the west as the Mediterranean Sea was assigned to Ephraim, and the land north of the brook and east of the sea went to Manasseh. Manasseh's northern boundary was the territory of Asher, and the eastern boundary was the territory of Issachar. The half-tribe of Manasseh was also given the following cities, which were situated in the areas assigned to Issachar and Asher: Beth-shean, Ibleam, Dor, Endor, Tanakh, Megiddo, where there are 3 cliffs with their respective villages. But since the descendants of Manasseh could not drive out the people who lived in those cities, the Canaanites remained. Later on, however, when the Israelis became strong enough, they forced the Canaanites to work as slaves. Then the 2 tribes of Joseph came to Joshua and asked, "Why have you given us only one portion of land when the Lord has given us large populations?" "If the hill country of Ephraim is not large enough for you," Joshua replied, "and if you're not able to do it, you may clear out the forest land where the Perizzites and Rephaim live." "Fine," said the tribes of Joseph, "for the Canaanites in the lowlands around Beth-shean and the valley of Jezreel have iron chariots and are too strong for us." "Then you shall have the mountain for us," Joshua replied, "and since you are such a large, strong tribe, you surely will be able to clear it out and live there, and I'm sure you can drive out the Canaanites from the valleys too, even though they are strong and have iron chariots." Joshua chapter 18, verse 1. After the conquest, although 7 of the tribes of Israel had not yet entered and conquered the land God had given them, all Israel gathered at Shiloh to set up the tabernacle. Then Joshua asked them, how long are you going to wait before clearing out the people living in the land that the Lord your God has given you? Select 3 men from each tribe, and I will send them to scout the unconquered territory and bring back a report of its size and natural division so I can divide it for you. The scouts will map it into several sections, and 7 sections rather, and then I will throw the sacred dice. The sacred dice? I will throw the sacred dice to decide which section will be assigned to each tribe. Interesting. However, remember that the Levites won't receive any land. They are priests of the Lord. That is their wonderful heritage. And of course, the tribes of Gad and Reuben and the half tribe of Manasseh won't receive any more, for they already have land on the east side of the Jordan where Moses promised them that they could settle. So the scouts went out to map the country and to bring back their report to Joshua. Then the Lord could assign the sections of the land to the tribes by the throw of the sacred dice. The men did as they were told and divided the entire territory into 7 sections, listing the cities in each section. Then they returned to Joshua and the camp at Shiloh. There at the tabernacle at Shiloh, the Lord showed Joshua by the sacred lottery which tribe should have each section. The land given to the tribe of Benjamin. The section of land assigned to the families of the tribe of Benjamin lay between the territory previously assigned to the tribes of Judah and Joseph. The northern boundary began at the Jordan River, went forth north of Jericho, then west through the hill country and the wilderness of Beth Aven. From there, the boundary went south to Luz, also called Bethel, and proceeded down to Ataroth Adar and the hill country south of lower Beth Horon. There, the border turned south, passing the mountain near Beth Horon and ending at the village of Kiriath Baal, sometimes called Kiriath Jearim, one of the cities of the tribe of Judah. This was the western boundary. The southern border ran from the edge of Kiriath Baal over Mount Ephron to the city of Naphtoah, and down to the base of the mountain beside the valley of Hinnom, north of the valley of Ephraim. From there it continued across the valley of Hinnom, crossed south to the old city of Jerusalem where the Jebusites lived, and continued down to En-Regal. From En-Regal, the boundary proceeded northeast to En-Shemesh and on to Gileath, which is opposite the slope of Adummim. Then it went down to the stone of Boham, who was the son of Reuben, where it passed along the north edge of Arabah. The border then went down into Arabah, ran south past Beth Hoglah, and ended at the north bay of the Dead Sea, which is the southern end of the Jordan River. The eastern border was the Jordan River. This was the land assigned to the tribe of Benjamin. These 26 cities were included in the land given to the tribe of Benjamin. Here we go. Jericho, Beth Hoglah, Emek Keziz, Beth Arabah, Zemaram, Bethel, Avim, Para, Ophrah, Shephar-Ammoni, Ophni, Geba, Gibeon, Ramoth, Beeroth, Mizpah, Chipirah, Mozah, Rechem, Irpeel, Tarbalah, Zelah, Halef, Jebus or Jerusalem, Gibeon, and Kiriath Jearim. We did it. All these cities and the surrounding villages were given to the tribe of Benjamin. This is the word of the Lord.